Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss one of the most pressing development challenges of our day. How can countries recover from the coronavirus pandemic while also addressing climate change and biodiversity loss? My name is Zain Verjee, and I will be moderating today's event. Over the next hour, we're going to be exploring what a sustainable recovery from the pandemic could look like for both people and planet. We're going to hear from a range of speakers, from ministers and CEOs to young voices and civil society. They're going to share their thoughts on what a sustainable future could look like and how we can get from here to there. Here's a taste of what we have in store. We really want you to be part of the conversation, and there are a number of ways you can engage. We're streaming live in English, Spanish, French, and Arabic on World Bank Live, where we are answering your questions right now. And we'll be running a live poll throughout this event, so stay tuned for more details on that. It's all happening at World Bank Live. Stay tuned at the end of this event for a special live show from the World Bank Group headquarters. It's really going to be a great chance for you to dive even deeper into some of the issues we're about to discuss. The conversation has already started. Please use the hashtag #PeopleAndPlanet to share your thoughts throughout this event. Let me start by welcoming World Bank Group President David Malpass to open today's event, which comes as countries are struggling to get past the pandemic, which has devastated communities and economies. David, why is it so important for countries to plan a recovery that delivers on jobs and growth, but also builds resilience in people and the environment and does not leave anyone behind?
Hi, thank you, Zain. Well, the COVID crisis is making clear some of the problems that were already there, but that are even clearer now. The problems of water services, for example, that are so important in fighting COVID. Access to food is important, and all of these, there's been underinvestment, and so this creates a big challenge in living conditions that would have been there even without COVID, but is made that much worse. Also, the information, there's a vacuum or not enough information, and especially in some of the poorest countries. So we're trying to address all of those, but one of the big challenges is that a lot of the natural systems have been neglected over the years. And so that can be the pollution in water, the pollution in air, the climate events that are more and more frequent, the water quality, marine plastics, all of these are challenges. A new one that COVID brought out is the jump from animals to people, or that people have talked about within the COVID crisis of how can viruses spread, and will that cause a repeated pandemic kind of problem or challenge. I do have to say, some positives come out when the world's faced with challenges. There are new positives, new constructive ways, and certainly technology has been I think, rising to the occasion in terms of information technology. But none of the threats have gone away, and the big challenge is how do we build back greener, build back better in a new environment as we come out of the recovery. People need to, I think, make the right investments now, ones that benefit people, ones that create low carbon stimulus, for example, that can really help people both grow and make progress on the resource needs that the planet has. So that's all some of the challenges that we face out of the COVID crisis.
How is the World Bank Group actually working with countries to respond to this crisis and recover sustainably?
One of the things we've been trying to do is reduce the number of subsidies and the cost of environmental of subsidies. For example, when a country holds down the price of gasoline, it has a combined problem because it's a fiscal expense and it distorts the way the economy works, and very importantly, it's a giant environmental problem. So trying to combine all of these into country programs that work is one of our goals. We've been able to be the largest multilateral lender in terms of climate resources. Over the last 5 years, the World Bank committed $83 billion of climate-related investments, which has been giantly helpful to the world. It also goes along with programs that benefit in terms of clean water, in terms of access to digital information, access to electricity. These are very important as people try to combat or respond to both the poverty and also the environmental and climate challenges that the countries face. Though we've led a biodiversity initiatives including the marine and coastal protected areas and also terrestrial protected areas. These are big initiatives to protect actual physical land, and then also our pro-green and pro-blue initiatives have been very effective in bringing resources together to focus on these problems. So some of the critical lessons that we're trying to bring out, first, that people are critical in their attitudes, their ability to interact with their own governments, with their programs in a transparent way. These have been very important. Also, what we've tried to do is have a system or a country partnership framework where, working together with the government, the various donors and concerned groups, civil society organizations, all work together to provide an economy-wide solution to some of the problems. And we've also looked and been innovative in terms of the instruments that are available. One, for example, in Rwanda, we've been engaged in a natural capital as part of the national planning exercise. So that's an important concept that brings together quite a few of the different expertise of the World Bank. And we've also, for example, in Fiji, developed the country's first climate vulnerability assessment, which is a starting point for attacking the problem. There needs to be an assessment that brings in information and data and also the country's own situation in order to tackle the problem. So I'm looking forward to today to hearing the speakers on why they think a sustainable recovery is important, and also how can we be true partners in helping everyone achieve it. And so that's the goal, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
I'm Vika in Fiji, and you're watching World Bank Group IMF annual meetings.
As promised, we are now going to open our poll for this session. The question we're asking is, what should a sustainable recovery focus on? For the purposes of this poll, we've had to narrow the choices down to 4 options. Here they are. Number 1, boosting jobs. Number 2, helping the poorest. Number 3, supporting low carbon economies. And lastly, protecting nature. I know that's quite a tough choice, right? You'll be able to take part and see how the votes are stacking up at World Bank Live. What does a sustainable recovery actually mean in practical terms for people's lives? What challenges and opportunities does it present for communities already struggling to respond to the coronavirus? That is what we've asked community leaders from around the world, and here's what some of them had to say.
The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world dramatically. The virus and its consequences are hitting the poorest of the poor the hardest. The virus has not only caused a health crisis, but also an economic, hunger, and poverty crisis of huge proportions. What is needed is the solidarity of the international community and global answers. The World Bank has a key role in this. In the next few years, it will invest $160 billion in the recovery. There is a need for emergency aid to strengthen health systems and prevent a famine, assistance to help protect jobs and stabilize government budgets, and a recovery program that is in line with the SDG agenda and the Paris Agreement. The recovery programs must be climate-friendly and sustainable. We want to do our part to make that happen.
For me, a sustainable future is one where the current generation can meet its needs without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet theirs when the time comes. Currently, climate change is impacting almost all sectors of Kenya's economy, both directly and indirectly, through frequent floods, droughts, landscape degradation, loss of biodiversity, and critical ecosystems which provide essential services to communities across the country. My vision for the future is to remodel the currently dominant economic paradigm into one of increasing material well-being, improving reliance on technological fixes to environmental degradation, and ensuring reduction of poverty and other social problems by continuous economic growth.
For me, a sustainable future always leads back to purpose. Purpose on a governmental level, societal and industry level. My journey as an activist started when I was 12 years old, when I set out to make my island home of Bali plastic bag free. Today, my work is all about empowering more young people to become young changemakers. We use the 17 SDG goals as a framework and the knowledge and experience of the frontline existing young changemakers, building that into a program, peer-to-peer content for the rising young changemaker. If there's one thing confirmed by COVID-19 is that we can no longer go back to business as usual. There is no normal, no new normal, just better normal. We have to accelerate the solutions we wish to see in our world today.
Inspiring words. We'll be hearing more from other community champions later on, but I'd like to, for now, pick up on Melati's idea of a better normal for our first discussion. I'm joined by Minister Ayaz Saeed Kayum, the Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications in Fiji, and Helen Mountford, Vice President for Climate and Economics at the World Resources Institute. I'd like to ask both of you about balancing multiple priorities to make the recovery sustainable, resilient, and inclusive. Minister Saeed Kayum, Fiji is no stranger to the need for resilience to natural disasters and the whole building back better approach. So can you tell us more about this thinking and how exactly it informs government policy?
Thank you, and it's a pleasure being here on this panel. Tragedy essentially has taught countries like us that, in particular those countries on the front lines of climate change, that building back better is a question of life or death. Because if you don't do so, you have this continuous cycle of rebuilding each time after new climate exacerbated or induced events. In 2016, we had the cyclone Winston. It wiped off 1/3 of the value of our GDP within 36 hours. And since then, of course, actually what happened, when that happened, we realized we had to build back better. And in fact, it paid off because we've had 7 cyclones since then. But those structures we build back better, in fact, have not been damaged in those 7 cyclones. The point, though, is that, specifically, it's not only about a matter of good domestic governance. It also needs to become a standard, throughout the global financial system. Because as you would understand, to build back better, you need to be able to have the money up front. And the multilateral financial institutions need to structurally reevaluate the financial incentives of building resilience. Because without these changes, the short-term cost to small developing countries of building back better actually will become unaffordable, even as we continue to suffer extreme climatic devastation. Of course, this has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, we had a cyclone in the middle of when we had cases out in the community some months back. Thankfully, we are now about 163 days without a COVID-19 case within the community. But we still have the continuous problem of climatic pressures put on us. And the reality is that building back better is more critical than ever.
And in that context, Ms. Mountford, the conversation that we're having now is taking place against this really serious backdrop of accelerating climate and biodiversity crisis. And the urgency of this is pretty clear. So can you share with us what you see as the key stakes in getting this right?
Absolutely. As the minister said, the climate and biodiversity crisis did not go into quarantine with COVID-19. They're continuing to hit communities and people around the world, from tropical storms to raging wildfires to life-threatening floods. So climate action and ecosystem protection really are essentially what we think of as an insurance policy to reduce the risks of future pandemics and other catastrophes. And they pay off. The Global Commission on Adaptation found that investments in climate adaptation can deliver between 2 to 10 times the returns for each dollar spent. So the urgency is really clear, but we also have an important moment now when we can actually reset our economies and build back in a way that tackles these crises and the COVID-19 crisis together. Governments and institutions like the World Bank and IMF are expected to invest something like $12 trillion in COVID response and economic recovery. This is an important window when we can invest this in approaches that deliver the clean air that we can breathe, transport solutions that put an end to urban congestion, more productive agriculture, and clean water for all. And the good news is that these are often the solutions that also deliver the jobs that we so desperately need. Investing in renewable energy or energy efficiency, for example, can deliver over double the jobs as coal or gas investments. Similarly for green transport options and nature-based solutions. So these are the solutions we need to seize now.
Minister, talk to us a little bit about how Pacific nations can cooperate amongst each other and build greater resilience. What's been your experience?
Well, we, the Pacific, has for a long time spoken with one voice on the urgency of mitigating and adapting to climate change. I mean, we, of course, our carbon footprint is almost negligible, but we are the cold face of climate change, and in fact, the climatic events. Prior to the Paris Agreement, we collectively pushed for the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, the only target which would keep most of our communities actually habitable. We also strove to make Fiji's presidency of COP23 a truly Pacific presidency by using, what we call the Talanoa dialogues to facilitate active listening, storytelling, and collaborative problem solving. When it comes to building resilience, I have to highlight this. Often the small scale of our markets, lack of economies of scale, or what they call bankable projects means traditional risk instruments and products actually are not built for the purpose of small states like the Pacific or in the Caribbean for that matter even. Our smaller scale, however, does make it harder to diversify risk and attract investment, but doesn't make it impossible because we've sort of said there could be what we call cross-border collaboration. And over the past few years, Fiji has piloted a number of innovative financial instruments, for example, the Green Bond, which is now listed on the London Stock Exchange, and we have a environment and climate adaptation levy. To scale up, and this is coming from the COP23 participation and following that, the other COPs. To scale up capacity for innovation, we are developing what we call the DRUA incubator, which will be a dedicated hub for coordinating and developing innovative financial instruments to support resilient development in Fiji, and of course, beyond that too. We have a number of initiatives, and I think, for example, we're looking at the decarbonizing our Pacific shipping through direct support for initiatives that will help us leverage private sector investment. So I think from that perspective, given that we have a lot of commonality within the Pacific, we'll be able to realize what I call a lot of the unrealized potential that we have by having some, translating these initiatives into financing innovative products.
And on that, Ms. Mountford, when we look at this phrase that I've heard a lot of recently, a whole of economy approach, what does it mean exactly? What can countries do? Just unpack it and drill down a little bit for us.
Thank you, Zain. It means basically that you can't have a climate policy that is separate from your economic growth strategy. The two need to be fully integrated to deliver the stronger, fairer, and more resilient growth that we want. The New Climate Economy Project, for example, found that investing in bold climate action could deliver $26 trillion in net economic benefits over the next 10 years, boosting jobs, driving down poverty, and saving lives. And if designed well, with phase out of fossil fuel subsidies and smart carbon pricing, it can also deliver substantial revenues to help countries to manage a just transition and the fiscal shortfalls that we know are coming. The Indonesian government, for example, has recently identified similar benefits for its own economy from an ambitious low carbon development path and taken steps to integrate this at the heart of their next 5-year economic development plan. This is the path that others need to follow. And the good news is that help is at hand. The NDC partnership, with the support of partners like the World Bank and ourselves at the World Resources Institute, are working to place economic advisors directly into ministries of finance, economy, and planning in 32 countries, including Fiji, to help the governments identify green recovery opportunities. Beyond this, the global financial system really needs to be reformed to better identify and manage such risks. Already we're seeing some investors, central banks, and others waking up to these risks and demanding transparent disclosure of climate and other risks, stress testing, and proper pricing of risks. But there's also a really important role for the World Bank and the IMF in this. They must integrate climate action at the center of their economic policy and financial support to countries during the recovery and after, and into their surveillance processes. This is the time to help countries build back smarter, fairer, and more resilient. So I'm very glad we're discussing it here at the annual meetings. Thank you
so much. Helen Mountford, Minister Ayaz Saeed Qayyum, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jairo Bedoya in San Jose de Ure in Colombia, and you are watching the World Bank Group IMF annual meetings.
A quick mention of another fun opportunity to engage. As you know, a resilient recovery is the theme of these meetings, and we're asking you to send us photos of what resilience means to you. We're adding these pictures to a virtual mosaic, so see how that's shaping up and upload your own pictures at our website. We're going to spend a lot of time at these meetings discussing new ways to support a resilient recovery, but there are lots of great ideas and initiatives that are already in action. Take a look at this for some inspiration.
2020, a global pandemic, a health and economic crisis like no other. A year also set to be the hottest on record, with wildfires burning and record numbers of plants and animals near extinction, while zoonotic diseases are on the rise. But even despite COVID-19, 2020 could mark a turning point, a once-in-a-generation chance to invest in fairer, cleaner, greener, and safer growth for people and planet. The World Bank Group can help countries respond to these crises and make vital investments in a more sustainable future. We are restoring degraded seascapes, providing research to help countries better value nature and address the drivers of biodiversity loss, including market-distorting subsidies. We are being creative, getting new players, new partners, and the private sector into the fight, jump-starting green markets from new products to bonds and insurance. developing nature-based solutions to the climate crisis. Green factories and industries that create jobs. Pushing for greater efficiency that saves energy and reduces greenhouse gases. This is changing communities and countries. We are supporting people through cleaner air to breathe and safe water to drink that fosters a healthy life. Finding ways they can adapt, because emergency response systems can work for a pandemic recovery and when a natural disaster strikes. And have jobs in a new and sustainable green economy.
Ingénieur en génie industriel productique. La première fois, on est 50 personnes et je suis la seule fille.
We are ambitious, helping change laws and policies. But more important, change minds. That thriving and growing go hand in hand with healing and restoring the planet. As the world changes, we must all change. Reimagine a future that is safe, environmentally sound, and inclusive. In every sector, industry, and region. To share our knowledge, our skills, our resources, and work together with partners to push for more. For her, and him. For them. For people and planet. Be ambitious with us.
Thank you so much for joining us as we look at how a sustainable recovery could work for people and planet. This is the second public event of our World Bank Group annual meetings, which are focusing on supporting a resilient recovery from the coronavirus crisis. We really hope that you'll join us throughout the week for some really important and engaging conversations. You can see the complete schedule at World Bank Live. And to comment on any of the events, you can use the hashtag #ResilientRecovery. A reminder too that we'll be putting your questions live straight after this event to Mari Pangestu, the World Bank's Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships, and Hans-Peter Lankes, IFC's Vice President of Economics and Private Sector Development. Okay, let's get back to the guests. The global downturn in the wake of this pandemic has hit employment around the world. So a sustainable recovery has to deliver good jobs in the short term, as well as reduce emissions and boost resilience in the long term. To talk about how that can be achieved and how people and livelihoods are part of the solution, I'm joined now from Mexico by Tania Ortiz Mena, CEO of Innova Infraestructura Energética. So great to have you here today. Tania, how do you see your company's role in supporting the country's energy transition toward a more sustainable mix?
Thank you, Sain, and good morning. Mexico is a very interesting country with regards to its energy mix. It's a very large economy. It's a population over 125 million people. It's a growing economy, an industrialized economy. So we need to ensure that we have a sustainable energy supply. And that's where my company has a very important role to play. Mexico has very rich solar and wind resources, and we have been very focused in developing those resources to generate energy, not only for the state electric utility, but also for industrial consumers that want to have clean and affordable energy. I'm very proud to say that we partner with IFC, and we were the first Mexican company to obtain a green loan by the IFC. So today, my company represents roughly 10% of the market share. And in addition, we've also made very important progress in developing natural gas infrastructure for Mexico to allow it to switch from heavier fuels to cleaner natural gas. So we're certainly a part of the energy transition in Mexico.
So you have a very solid sustainability model. Could you just describe it to us and share with us what you've learned?
Yes. Let me tell you a story. Sustainability is part of our DNA. The company that I lead went public in 2013. We did our IPO. So immediately after we IPO, to my surprise, I received a call from the Mexican Stock Exchange explaining that they would do a sustainability audit. I did not know that was coming. It was a complete shock. But we basically opened our doors and allowed the Mexican Stock Exchange to review our sustainability practices, policies, etc. And we became since then part of Mexico's Stock Exchange Sustainability Index. So it was already part of our culture, and we've continued to achieve or to propose higher metrics, higher standards in sustainability. And it's part of what we do every day, both with regards to support of our communities, protection of the environment, but also promoting economic development in Mexico and best corporate governance practices.
What would be your greatest takeaway if you were to share lessons that you've learned with other energy companies in the region? What would be the one thing?
In terms of sustainability, I would summarize it by saying, do the right thing. Do the right thing even when no one is watching. And when you're an energy company, doing the right thing means caring for your community. It means protecting the environment, and it means following the best corporate governance practices. Energy companies take a very long-term view on their business, and in order to be successful long-term, you need to incorporate sustainability into everything that you do every day.
Given the current COVID context, though, and some of the immediate economic pressures that countries are facing, how do you as a CEO or as a company reconcile really important short-term objectives and reconcile them with the longer-term climate and sustainability goals? How do you get that balance?
Well, the challenge related to the pandemic has a very particular impact on energy companies, because on one hand, for me, my number one priority is the health and well-being of my team. We have 1,600 employees in Mexico, and every night I get a report ensuring that all of us are healthy. Many of us are working from home, but in the energy industry, you need to keep the plants running because you need to keep the lights on. So that means that we do have a lot of people out in the field, and we're also responsible for them. So it's a combination between obviously prioritizing and ensuring that your people are healthy, but also implementing different ways of working, different protocols, so that literally we can keep the lights on. So we have a great responsibility to our country.
Thank you very much, Tania Ortiz Mena. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you to Ms. Ortiz Mena. Clean energy is also a priority for the government of Costa Rica, which has adopted a long-term decarbonization strategy. Maria del Pilar Garrido Gonzalo is the Minister of National Planning and Economic Policy, and she shared her country's vision with us via a video message.
Greetings from Costa Rica. As President Alvarado recently said, the pandemic is an accelerator of change. We now have the opportunity to link post-COVID-19 recovery plans with solutions to climate change. In the case of Costa Rica, we use the decarbonization plan as a centerpiece to address the COVID crisis and to recover better. The decarbonization plan is a strategic document that offers a roadmap for a new development model and to respond to the demands of the fourth industrial revolution, and at the same time to respond to the climate and biodiversity crisis in a systemic way. It highlights the need to move towards a sustainable economy based on 3 Ds: digitalization, decentralization in the electricity production, and decarbonization. It is our goal to be a net emissions country in 2050. We understand that decarbonization and resilience is not a burden to the development, but it is a new opportunity to give it a new sense of direction. Countries can design the recovery phase taking into account other strategies, such as the following: intensifying the use of renewable energy and energy efficiency at a competitive cost, leveraging the dynamism of public investment in order to build climate resilient works, promoting the new productive activities of green growth that enable the rapid post-COVID recovery for its high added value.
Now let's take a moment to hear from some more community champions and leaders for their vision of a sustainable recovery.
For me, a sustainable future means being able to live in a world that is safe, secure, and livable. And it also means being able to live in a world whereby my generation and all generations to come will not have to bear the consequences of the actions of previous generations. And it also means being able to live in a world whereby the entire human race is in harmony with nature. And this is definitely possible if we put people and our planet before profits. As the founder of Green Generation Initiative that focuses on nurturing young people to love nature and be conscious of the environment at a young age, and as the coordinator of Daima Coalition that is led by Wangari Maathai Foundation and is focusing on creating an appreciation for the value of green spaces and also making sure that people protect the green spaces, that I am focused on making sure that we attain this sustainable future. I do believe that we can build back better by incorporating green spaces into our green recovery. And I believe that we can also build back better if we listen to the voices of the young people that are trying to champion for change in terms of environmental conservation. And together we can win this war against the climate and ecological crisis.
There's a lot of uncertainties in this moment, and we don't know when the full recovery from COVID-19 will happen, but we need to plan for it right now. I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to reset our relationship with nature. At the same time, it's an opportunity to scale up investments in nature-based solutions that can help our forests, our lands, and oceans to absorb carbon and protect biodiversity. Friends and colleagues, nobody can prosper in a sick planet. We'll need to recognize that it is in our own self-interest to protect and invest in nature. I'm so pleased to have the chance to work to help you, the world, ensure that the COVID recovery is a sustainable one. This will be the Global Environmental Facility's singular focus on this coming year, and I know we can achieve the goal together. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Sustainable development is inclusive, reflective, forward-looking, and responsible development for future and current generations that also builds and maintains environmental integrity. This is exactly the case of Ghana's Cocoa Forest Reprise program. We've come from a past of deforestation, forest degradation, non-collaborative forest management, and losses in agricultural production into transformative landscape programs that restore agricultural production, restore degraded forests, and also provide alternative and additional livelihood support for our communities whilst raising climate ambition. Now more than ever, we feel a need to rise out of the COVID-19 pandemic by building back better because we have seen the very essence of our forest. My greatest assurance of success is in the strong and collaborative partnerships we have built, particularly the private sector and our local communities.
For me, a sustainable future means achieving the 2050 vision of the Convention on Biological Diversity, living in harmony with nature. This year, parties to the convention were supposed to adopt a new global framework for biodiversity, but COVID-19 has delayed that. The pandemic is a visceral reminder of why we so urgently need this framework. More than just a set of targets, we need a framework that will drive the transformational change we need to rebalance our relationship with nature and build resilient communities and economies. That is why we are using this unexpected extra time to reach out to more and different partners. We need to engage all government ministries, the financial sector, in fact, all sectors of society. I trust the discussions at the World Bank annual meetings will help us to build new partnerships for this transformation. Thank you.
I'm Madina Mamraeva in Nur Sultan, Kazakhstan. and you are watching the World Bank Group IMF annual meetings.
If you've just joined us, welcome. I'm Zain Verji, and we're discussing how to build a sustainable recovery that protects people and planet. That's also the hashtag we're using for this event, so please do share your thoughts and comments. As Elizabeth Mrema said so eloquently in her video message, the next year is going to be key as new targets are set for the conservation, sustainable use, and sharing of benefits from biodiversity. Which brings us to our final discussion, where our speakers are going to delve into how a sustainable recovery can restore ecosystems, reverse biodiversity loss, create better food systems and jobs, all at the same time. Welcome to Minister Celso Correa, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of Mozambique, and Diane Holdorf, MD at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Minister, let's start with you first. How has Mozambique included biodiversity and supporting nature into your planning and budgeting in the past?
Actually, we're following a long-term plan. As you know, Mozambique has 25% of our land declared the conservation area. In the past years, we've suffered a lot of poaching and destruction of our biodiversity, but we've introduced a program which is called MozBio in order to bring back this wealth that we have. So we have improved a lot. We have recovered a lot of animals in our areas, but our strategy has been based on involving communities around these areas and make sure that communities have income from the projects like tourism and community agriculture. So we believe that by involving these communities, we're making a big change in the country and giving property to them in terms of controlling these areas.
How have you gotten them involved more specifically, those communities?
Communities in areas that we are talking about have access to credit in order to produce. They are organized in terms of small villages. So all the villages are being supported in terms also of water, access of water, and all households at the moment are getting involved in chains. For example, the production of honey, it's one of the products that is making a big difference for these villages. But we also have a big project called Sustenta, which comes from sustainability in Mozambique, financed by the World Bank, which is also introducing new technologies of producing without creating damage into the environment.
Ms. Holdorf, what kind of role does the private sector have in financing sustainability?
Thanks so much. This is such an important space for the private sector because business depends on these natural resources for its own success, but equally really for the success of the communities and the employees and the people who rely on business as well. And there's opportunities in preserving and protecting biodiversity through business operations. I think the minister just shared a great example of how improved agricultural practices that take biodiversity into consideration can really deliver results of increased, healthier production, but also opportunities for learning and income improvements for farmers and communities whose rural livelihoods depend on nature, and in this case, agriculture. And those are exactly the types of things that we look for, is those kinds of things that really deliver business resilience and support communities as well.
What are some of the practical things that need to happen in order to make this work, financing biodiversity? Give us a few examples and tools.
There are several that I can share. There's the example of agricultural practices which invest in soil health and biodiversity on farm to improve the water retention and the quality of water, both for the farm and for the community. There's investments into forests and forest diversity for communities that rely on forest product income. And of course, there's a lot of benefit for types of investments like into mangroves. Not only do we see improved natural weather hazard risk reduction, but we see real benefits to local fisheries and again, community incomes. So these types of things all have very good business value and come down to very specific location benefiting practices.
Minister, how are you addressing some of the challenges that Mozambique faces of improving agricultural productivity on the one hand, while avoiding the degradation of the land and the loss of biodiversity?
One of the main reasons of deforestation of the country has been the practice of slash and burn in Mozambique. So by introducing these new methods of producing agriculture, we're reducing also emissions, but protecting the forestry. So this approach that we took the last 5 years has managed to reduce our emissions, also our deforestation in a big percentage. We're talking about 20% reduction. So this is a long-term process. Most of the population practice this kind of agriculture. So we will keep on intensifying this transmission of technology into communities to make the difference. We don't pollute a lot, but we are one of the countries which is most exposed to climate change, as you know. Idai and Kenneth, which actually destroyed a lot of property and families in the past 2 years. So we are a country that we have no choice but to go sustainable. And we are doing all our policies are taking in consideration sustainability.
Ms. Holdorf, how then can we have a nature positive recovery going forward that really builds more sustainable and resilient food systems?
I think this is the critical question, particularly as we reflect on it during this COVID recovery period. What started as a health crisis has really turned into quite an economic crisis for many countries, and this is having significant impacts across businesses and communities. We were very concerned at the beginning that it would affect food security, and in fact, the food system has proven to be a bit more resilient than we had anticipated, but nevertheless, we saw real systemic challenges in areas of nutritional security, potential risks around food price spikes, which have mostly been mitigated, but have longer-term implications associated with them, and real challenges, particularly for financing to smallholders and SMEs through big global value chains. So when we think about resilience of the food system, we have to think about the stages of the chain from production to storage, especially like cold chain storage and building capacity for these types of logistics capabilities at every stage. And then also thinking about those regions, as the minister was just speaking to, like Mozambique, that are particularly at risk as we look at climate change and nature loss, and focusing resilience and nature positive, carbon positive solutions into those regions that have the biggest risks and the biggest, therefore, gains to come. And that is where we see real food system resilience starting to come from, and are what we're actually both investing in as well as seeking and support as governments start to put these big packages for recovery into place.
Minister, with that, what would you say was the greatest lesson that you've learned on focusing on resilience when it comes to food systems? What should be our takeaway from your experience in Mozambique?
The biggest experience is that I think the world has recognized that in order to achieve our goals, we must put communities in the center of this challenge. We need to involve communities at the local level and educate them on benefits of taking a different path, a different approach, and changing their ways of lives. So the biggest takeaway is to make sure that communities are involved.
Thank you so much, Celso Correa, Diane Holdorf. Appreciate your time as well as your insights on this really important topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to our panelists. Let me turn for the final time to our community champions and leaders to hear what inspires them to push for a sustainable recovery.
To me, a sustainable future is a future where people are economically empowered and there's good health. Good health, definitely, I mean, there's clean and enough water for the society. So being born and raised here in Kibera slums, and I started an organization because I was a footballer. I saw so many people losing life at a tender age due to crime and drugs. So at the moment, due to COVID, we've been supporting the same community in terms of giving food, sanitizer, and also offering water and hand wash points. So this one we've been targeting. Our main cause has been people who are disabled, the elderly, and also orphan children and expectant women. So that is what we've been doing. And to cap the pro-COVID, our future plan is to have a good and enough training skills, because most of the people that lost job during this COVID time are those people who did not have enough skills. So at the moment, that is the plan we have, to train more youths and women in terms of economical empowerment to be able to sustain their lives.
For me, a post-pandemic future is about a new social contract for jobs, growth, and sustainability. Here in India, where millions of migrant workers have gone home and millions of small businesses are in trouble, we at CEW have supported local administration on the public health response, and we are designing new pathways for a sustainable and just recovery. We've kicked off a $3 million program to support rural startups using clean energy for income-generating activities. We're designing financial solutions to crowd in billions of dollars of investment into sustainable infrastructure. We're focusing on sustainable agriculture and food systems. We are focusing on urban distributed energy infrastructure that creates many more jobs, and on urban sustainable transport, public transport systems. We have to focus on the tail end risks that climate change poses before us to be able to build a more resilient society.
For me, a sustainable future is about providing universal access to all in a way that's affordable, with little or no negative impact to the immediate environment. Access could be in the form of education, energy, transport, and other forms of infrastructure. The recent project in Djibouti, which is a 60 megawatt wind farm project, is one of such examples. When operational, that project will provide the country with 50% of its energy access, as well as help the country to achieve 100% of its energy from renewable energy sources. Thank you.
For me, the sustainable future is the future where peoples can live in harmony with the nature. And we know when we protect nature, it's protect our health back. The future where indigenous people rights are recognized and respected because we are driving the traditional knowledge that help us to protect our nature. It is possible because we saw with COVID-19 overnight how the world come together in solidarity and invest in economy. But the green recovery must be a reality for the poor peoples that left behind and the most impacted in terms of health, education, and access to the clean water. It must fight the inequality and justice and marginalizations of the peoples, of indigenous peoples, of my peoples who are living since centuries in these threats.
I'm Milan Vaklicevic in Podgorica, Montenegro, and you are watching the World Bank Group IMF annual meetings.
Before we hear from our last guest today, a reminder that there is still time to take part in our poll. The question we're asking is, what should a sustainable recovery focus on? Boosting jobs, helping the poorest, supporting low-carbon economies, or protecting nature? Cast your vote, World Bank Live, and please join Shri Sridhar just a few minutes from now, who'll have the final results and will be putting questions you've been submitting directly to Mary Pangestu, the World Bank's Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships, and Hans-Peter Lankes, IFC's Vice President of Economics and Private Sector Development. Our final guest today is Alok Sharma, Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy for the UK and Minister for COP26, which will take place next year in Glasgow. Many of the issues we've discussed today will be front and center as the world's leaders meet at that conference. He shared with us a brief statement on how the international community can support a sustainable recovery from the pandemic on the road to COP26.
Thank you very much. The coronavirus pandemic has presented us all with very many challenges, but our recovery offers a chance to reshape the global economy. By investing now to reduce emissions, build resilience, and adapt to climate change, we can create jobs and generate growth. At the same time, we can protect the planet for future generations. The international community is absolutely integral to realizing the potential of a global green recovery. Countries, public finance institutions, businesses, civil society, we must all work together towards building back greener. On the 12th of December, the UK and the UN Secretary General will co-host a summit on the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement alongside France, Chile, and Italy. And I invite world leaders to use this occasion to announce ambitious and nationally determined contributions, to commit to long-term strategies to get to net zero, and to launch adaptation plans. And of course, to also make enhanced commitments on international climate finance beyond 2020. It's critical that donor countries deliver on their commitments and that we collectively demonstrate progress towards that totemic $100 billion a year goal. The UK itself is doubling its international climate finance commitment to £11.6 billion over a 5-year period. And I hope that many other donor countries will make similar commitments at the event in December. The international financial system is going to be integral to delivering a green recovery. The World Bank Group and regional banks have responded with speed and ambition to the pandemic, making over $200 billion available over the coming year. Now, I believe, we must clarify precisely how this funding will support a green, inclusive, and resilient global recovery. We need the leadership of the World Bank and the IMF and other financial institutions in guiding countries to develop their recovery plans. Your expertise in finance is going to be absolutely critical in helping climate vulnerable countries build their resilience. We have an opportunity to unite the world to meet shared challenges at this pivotal moment in our shared history. So ahead of COP26, let's work together to make a green recovery a reality around the world, creating a prosperous and sustainable future for our children and grandchildren. We owe that to current and future generations.
We're closing today's session with a performance by Malian musician and activist for climate, Ina Moja. Ina Moja has been involved in the Great Green Wall movement, an effort to grow an 8,000-kilometer wall of trees and plants across the width of Africa, which, once complete, will be the largest living structure on the planet. We're so honored that she composed the song for us today, reminding us that no matter who or where you are, you're never too small to make a difference.
If the world thinks that you're not enough, they cannot feel the fire in your bones. Here you stand in your truth and your flaws. Who are they to throw you their stones? I will rise with you, I will stand with you. If I have to, I will fight for you. If we have to, we will fight as one. I will rise with you, I will stand with you. If I have to, I will fight for you. Anga wili kanjo, anga doni sera. Ni muso kele kumana, muso keme kambora. Anga wili kanjo, anga doni sera. Ni muso kele kumana, muso keme kambora.
Thank you to all the guests who took part in today's event, and thank you to everyone watching. We hope you've learned something new and have encouraged you to join the conversation. And to keep that conversation going, I'm handing over now to Sri Sridhar, who is live in the atrium of the World Bank Group headquarters in Washington, D.C.